Hey everyone, so today we're going to unravel this thread that runs, believe it or not, from the very first pages of the Bible all the way to the last, and it's the story of clothing. But trust me, this is about way more than just fabric and fashion. It's this really deep story about shame, about sacrifice, and what it really means to be covered. So let's just jump right in with a pretty direct question. What are you trying to cover up? You know that feeling, right, when you've messed up and you just wish you could disappear? Or that constant pressure to make your life look perfect online? That instinct to hide, that feeling of being exposed or ashamed. It's something we all feel. And as we're going to see, it has roots in one of the oldest stories ever told. Okay, so here's the plan. We're going to start with that universal feeling of shame. Then we'll trace it all the way back to a garden, look at humanity's first quick fix, and contrast that with a divine solution. And we'll wrap it all up with what the Bible calls the ultimate wardrobe. All right, first things first, we need to get one key idea down. In the Bible, when you see the word nakedness, it often means a lot more than just not wearing clothes. It's actually this powerful metaphor for a spiritual state, a state of vulnerability, of guilt, and of shame. I mean, take a look at this verse from Revelation. It's a real gut check. God is basically saying to this church, hey, you might look successful and put together on the outside, but on the inside, you're exposed. You're empty. It's this idea that you can have everything going for you but still feel this deep sense of inadequacy and shame. So this all leads to a crucial point. The Bible basically sets up this premise that to be in the presence of a holy God, you can't be in that state of shameful nakedness. You have to be clothed, not just literally, but more importantly, spiritually. Now, to understand where this whole idea comes from, we gotta go way back to the beginning, to the story of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, because this is where we see two totally different kinds of nakedness pop up. This verse here describes the first kind of nakedness, which is all about complete innocence. Before they disobeyed, being unclothed was just a fact. There was no guilt, no self-consciousness, and so there was absolutely no shame connected to it. But then, boom, everything changes. After they disobey that one command from God, the text says their eyes were opened. Now, they weren't physically any different, but their perception of themselves was. Suddenly, they feel exposed, they feel vulnerable, they feel guilty. This right here is the birth of that second kind of nakedness, the one that's tied directly to sin and shame. So, what do you do when you're hit with this brand new, terrifying feeling of shame? Well, you try to fix it. And what we see next is humanity's very first attempt to solve its own problem. This is such a brilliant picture of human instinct, isn't it? The immediate reaction to feeling shame is to try and hide it, to cover it up with our own efforts. They see a problem, they panic, and they grab the nearest thing they can find, fig leaves, to patch it up themselves. And in the theological terms, this action is a perfect picture of what's called self-righteousness. It's that attempt to make ourselves acceptable, to cover our own flaws, using our own ingenuity and effort. Those fig leaves are a symbol of trying to fix a deep spiritual problem with a DIY solution. And we still do it, right? We do it by crafting that perfect image on social media, or chasing a promotion to feel worthy, or just by trying to be a good person on our own terms. So why is the solution so flawed? Well, centuries later, the prophet Isaiah gives us a pretty stark answer. He says that from God's perspective, even our very best attempts to make ourselves righteous are like filthy rags. Just like fig leaves, they're flimsy, they're temporary, and at the end of the day, they just can't cover the real issue. And spoiler alert, the fig leaves don't work. Adam and Eve still hide from God, which proves their little self-made covering just wasn't enough. And this is where the story takes a really dramatic turn, because God himself steps in to provide a completely different kind of covering. Just notice the huge difference here. A second ago, Adam and Eve made themselves coverings. But here, it says, the Lord God made tunics of skin and clothed them. This isn't a human effort. This is a divine gift. It's a provision, not an invention. Yeah, let's just break this down side by side, because the contrast is everything. The fig leaves, that's all human effort. The leather garments, that's a divine gift. One just tries to hide the problem, while the other actually solves it. One is temporary and flimsy, the other, it's permanent and durable. It is the perfect picture of self-righteousness versus God's righteousness. But hang on, there's a really heavy implication here that we can't miss. To make garments of skin, an animal had to die. For the very first time, blood was shed to cover human sin. This divine gift, this incredible act of grace, came at the cost of a life. And that introduces this massive idea that covering our shame requires a sacrifice. Now, this whole theme of a covering provided by God through a sacrifice, it doesn't just end there in Genesis. It's a thread that gets pulled all the way through the biblical story, and it's pointing toward an ultimate, perfect garment. You can think of that garment of skin as a powerful symbol, a foreshadowing. It was like a coming soon sign. It was a temporary covering that pointed forward to a final, perfect covering that would one day be provided for good. And that final garment? It's described in the New Testament as fine linen or samafo in the original Korean source material, and it's described as bright and clean and pure. It's a symbol of a true and perfect righteousness. And here it is, the beautiful culmination of the whole story. Listen to the language here. It was granted to her to clothe herself. See that? Just like the leather garments back in the garden, this final, perfect righteousness is not something we make for ourselves. It's a gift. It has to be received. So let's just trace that journey one more time from start to finish. We start in a state of innocent, unashamed nakedness. That becomes a shameful nakedness because of sin. Then humanity tries its own fig leaf fix, and it totally fails. So God steps in and provides a temporary covering through sacrifice, the leather garment, which is all pointing to the ultimate gift of true righteousness, that white robe of fine linen. And that really brings us to the core takeaway of this entire narrative. The story of clothing in the Bible is a story about grace. It makes the argument that a true, lasting covering for our shame, what the Bible calls righteousness, is never something we can weave together for ourselves. It has to be received as a gift. Which leaves us with one final metaphorical question for you. In your life, when you feel that sense of shame or inadequacy, what do you reach for? Are you trying to stitch together some flimsy fig leaves of your own making? Or are you willing to accept a covering that's far more durable, a gift that was given at a great cost?